Hello, Scones here. I'm going to read a book that was written in 2008 by Jim Marrs. I'm going to read the back of it, the little summary at the back, because that sort of gets across what it's about. Throw out everything you think you know about history. Close the approved textbooks, turn off the corporate mass media, and whatever you do, don't believe anything you hear from the government. The rise of the Fourth Reich reveals the truth about American power. In this explosive expose, the legendary Jim Marrs explores the frighteningly real possibility that today in the United States, an insidious ideology thought to have been vanquished more than a half-century ago is actually flourishing. At the end of World War II, ranking Nazis, along with their young and fanatical protégés, used the loot of Europe to create corporate front companies in many countries, worming their way into corporate America. They brought with them miraculous weapons technology that helped win the space race, but they also brought their Nazi philosophy based on the authoritarian premise that the end justifies the means, including unprovoked wars of aggression and curtailment of individual liberties, which has since gained an iron hold in the land of the free. Jim Marrs has gathered compelling evidence of the effort that has been underway for the past 60 years to bring a form of National Socialism to modern America, creating in essence a new empire or Fourth Reich. National Socialism never died. It was reborn in America and is ready to seize power. Award-winning journalist Jim Marrs is the New York Times best-selling author of Rule by Secrecy, Alien Agenda, and Crossfire, which served as a basis for the Oliver Stone film JFK. He lives in Texas. Well, he did live in Texas. He doesn't now. He's passed away, unfortunately. Okay, so The Rise of the Fourth Reich by Jim Marrs, written in 2008. I'll start off with the introduction. Adolf Hitler's Third Reich ended in Berlin on April the 30th, 1945. Thunder reverberated from a storm of Russian artillery that was bombarding the ruined capital. The day before, along with the incoming shells, came particularly bad news for the Führer, who by this late date in World War II was confined to his underground bunker beneath the Reich Chancellery. Hitler had learned that 2 days earlier his Axis partner, Italy's fascist dictator Benito Mussolini, had been captured by paramilitary Italian resistance fighters. Mussolini and his mistress, Clara Petacchi, were executed and their bodies were left hanging upside down in a Milan piazza. This news was especially worrisome to Hitler because only hours earlier he had married Eva Braun in a small civil ceremony inside the Führerbunker. Hitler had previously vowed never to be captured alive and reiterated to his entourage that neither he nor his new bride would be made a spectacle presented by the Jews to divert the hysterical masses. He made obvious preparations for the end of his reign. He handed out poison capsules to his remaining female secretaries and had Blondie, his favourite Alsatian dog, poisoned. 2 other household dogs were shot. Dictating a last will, he stated, "I, myself and my wife, in order to escape the disgrace of deposition or capitulation, choose death." He ordered that their bodies be burned immediately. But Hitler, decorated World War I soldier and hardened political fighter, made it clear that he and his philosophies would not leave the world stage quietly. He added, "From the sacrifice of our soldiers and from my own unity with them, unto death will in any case spring up in the history of Germany the seed of a radiant renaissance of the National Socialist movement and thus of the realization of a true community of nations." Hitler then passed along a line of his entourage, mostly women, and shook their hands while mumbling inaudibly. Frau Traudl-Junge, one of the secretaries present, recalled that Hitler's eyes seemed to be looking far away beyond the walls of the bunker. At about 3 p.m. on April the 30th, members of Hitler's entourage heard a single shot from their leader's quarters. Some time later, Hitler's valet, SS Sturmbannführer Heinz Linge, and an orderly emerged with a blanket-covered body. Martin Bormann, Hitler's private secretary, head of the Nazi Party and the most powerful man in the Reich after Hitler, followed with the body of a woman. The corpses were carried up to a garden area, placed in a shell crater, and burned with gasoline. However, these remains were never found, reportedly due to the constant shelling. By evening, a Soviet flag was flying atop the Reichstag. It appeared that Hitler and his Third Reich were finished. The escape of Adolf Hitler. It was well known and publicly reported that Hitler often made use of doubles, men who closely resembled him, for use at certain public presentations. Pauline Kohler, a maid at Hitler's Berghof in Berchtesgaden, insisted that she knew of at least 3 men who doubled for Hitler. Did Hitler make use of one final double in the bunker? After all, the few persons who testified that he was dead were ardent Nazis who were eager to please their captors, whether Russian, British, or American, with accounts of the leader's death. Was the strange execution of Eva Braun's brother-in-law, Hermann Fegelein, due to his knowledge of Hitler's escape plan with the use of a double? Fegelein had left the bunker, but protested when captured by an SS search party that he planned to return. He was later shot by a firing squad in the Chancellery Garden for desertion. Yet days earlier, Hitler had urged others in the bunker to flee. Get out, he cried. Go to South Germany. I'll stay here. It is all over anyhow. Why make Fegelein the exception? Evidence that Fegelein was privy to secret knowledge comes from Christina Reimann, an actress who met with Fegelein in Berlin on April 27th. She told author Glenn B. Infield, "He was very worried. We had several drinks together and he kept repeating that there were 2 Hitlers in Berlin. I thought he was drunk. Just before he left me, however, he said that if the Führer ever discovered that he, Fegelein, knew his secret, Hitler would kill him." To fake Hitler's death would have been simple. A Hitler double could have been secreted into the bunker any time prior to his reported suicide. After Hitler got Eva to take poison, or a dead duplicate Eva brought in, the double, dressed in the Führer's clothing, could have been shot, a poison capsule placed in his mouth, and left to be covered by Bormann and retrieved by the unsuspecting valet Linge. Hitler could then have passed from the study through his living quarters to a small conference room containing a stairway to the garden above. Hitler had instructed Linge to wait at least 10 minutes before entering the room. While Linge and the others from the entourage waited in the hallway outside Hitler's study, the Führer's party and an armed SS escort could have made their way to a secluded spot to await darkness. Under the cover of night, Hitler could have moved along Hermann Göring-Strasse, then cut across the Tiergarten to the zoo station near Adolf Hitler Platz. From there, they could have followed the rail lines to the Reichssportfeld and crossed the Scharndorfer Strasse to the Pischelsdorf Walk, a short walk to the Havel River, where a Ju-52 floatplane would have been waiting to fly the Führer out. Indeed, a Ju-52 pontoon plane had landed on the Havel the previous night, at the radioed request of someone in the Führer bunker. It took off that same night. Author Infield has suspected this was a practice run for the following night. Once away from Berlin, an aeroplane could have taken Hitler almost anywhere in territory not under direct control of the Allies, Switzerland, Spain, or any number of other friendly locations. But did this happen? Conventional history says that Hitler and Eva Braun committed suicide in the bunker. End of story, despite tantalizing tidbits of information that have surfaced since the war. On July the 17th, 1945, during the Potsdam Conference, Soviet leader Joseph Stalin reportedly told US President Harry S. Truman that Hitler did not commit suicide, but probably escaped. Years later, the Russians produced photos purporting to be of Hitler's dead body, which contradicted their earlier accounts that the bodies of Hitler and his mistress had been immediately burned. Today, while Hitler's fate may be intriguing and undoubtedly will be argued for years, it is immaterial, a moot point. What is certain is that Hitler's legacy, National Socialism, lives on. The history of how the Nazis, armed with advanced technology and the greatest hoard of treasure in history, were able to escape justice at the end of World War II is perhaps the greatest untold story of the 20th century. From the days of Lyndon B. Johnson to those of George W. Bush, there has been talk of America turning fascist. Most people, this author included, dismissed this as radical rhetoric. Unfortunately, as shall be seen, this might be not so far from the truth. The Germans were defeated in World War II, but not the Nazis. They were simply forced to move. They scattered to the four corners of the world. Many of them came to the United States and penetrated what President Dwight D. Eisenhower termed the military-industrial complex. They escaped with the loot of Europe, as well as rocket science and even more exotic technologies. Some of this technology was so advanced that it remains classified in US government files even today. Both Nazi science and ideology were brought to America in the aftermath of World War II, with the aid and assistance of the very same self-styled globalists who created National Socialism in the first place. Their agenda matches that of the old Bavarian Illuminati, who were long thought to have perished soon after the time of George Washington. But if the order died, its credo lives on: power and control through stealth by any means possible. From the seeds of Nazism planted in America during the Cold War sprang a whole new nation, one that today has become the greatest superpower in history, but has also incurred a growing hatred among the nations of the world, as well as alienation and dissension among its own citizens. At the beginning of the third millennium after Christ, by most criteria, the once free constitutional republic of the United States had become a National Socialist nation, an empire of the creators of the Third Reich, a Fourth Reich. If this assessment seems harsh and unbelievable, read on. Be advised that this work has no political conviction to advocate, no conspiracy theory to press, and no hidden agenda. It is a collection of supportable facts that leads to certain conclusions, uncomfortable and unconventional as they may be. But first, one must understand the definition of the terms under consideration. A definition of terms. Everyone has heard of Hitler's Third Reich, but what were the First and Second Reichs? The First Reich is known as the Holy Roman Empire, although it was neither holy nor Roman nor an empire. It was founded by the Frankish King Charles I, called Charlemagne or Charles the Great, who was crowned emperor in 800 AD by Pope Leo III after conquering and annexing most of Europe, including Germany, Switzerland, Austria, the Low Countries, and parts of France, Italy, and Czechoslovakia. This monarchical empire, modelled after the Roman Empire and ruled by Kaisers or Caesars, existed until 1806, when Napoleon marched his troops into Berlin. The Second Reich was created by Prince Otto von Bismarck, who as Premier of Prussia defeated Napoleon III in 1871 and became the Iron Chancellor over about 300 independent states. Bismarck's Reich, toward the end headed by Kaiser Wilhelm II, lasted until 1918 and ended with the defeat of the Central Powers of Germany and Austria-Hungary in World War I. With Adolf Hitler's ascension to power in 1933, he proclaimed Greater Germany as the Third Reich, Reich being the German word for empire. Interestingly enough, when used with a lowercase r, the word Reich means rich or wealthy. A Reich, therefore, could mean an empire of the wealthy. The term Nazi stems from the acronym of National Socialism. This was derived by combining the first syllable of national and the second syllable of Socialist in the name National Socialist Deutsche Arbeiterpartei, the National Socialist German Workers' Party. This was a small radical political party Hitler built into a fascist system that threatened the entire world. Nazism is a philosophy. One recent dictionary defines a Nazi as a person holding extreme racist authoritarian views or behaving brutally, or anyone belonging to any organization similar to the Nazis. One edition of the American Heritage Dictionary of the English language defined fascism, defined fascism as a philosophy or system of government that advocates or exercises a dictatorship of the extreme right, typically through the merging of state and business leadership together with an ideology of belligerent nationalism. Always remember that a typical attribute of fascism is the merging of state and business leadership. Italian dictator Benito Mussolini is credited with coining the word fascism, a name taken from his fascist black shirts called fasciti. This term derived from the ancient Roman symbol of the fasces, a bundle of rods with a protruding axe blade. It was the symbol of central authority. Under fascism, the individual is subordinate to the state, usually headed by a single leader. However, even Mussolini pointed out that the first stage of fascism should more appropriately be called corporatism, because it is the merger of state and corporate power. For the remainder of this work, fascism will be defined as the merger of state and corporate power. In fascist Italy and Nazi Germany, the state gained control over the corporations. In modern America, corporations have gained control over the state. The end result is the same. Mussolini proclaimed, "The maxim that society exists only for the well-being and freedom of the individuals composing it does not seem to be in conformity with nature's plans." If classical liberalism spells individualism, fascism spells government. And Thomas J. DiLorenzo, professor of economics at Loyola College in Baltimore, Maryland, wrote, "It is important to recognize that as an economic system, fascism was widely accepted in the 1920s and 30s. The evil deeds of individual fascists were later condemned, but the practice of economic fascism never was. Party politics, slogans, and social issues are employed to distract the masses. The world's elite deal in only one commodity: power. They seek to gain and maintain the controlling power that comes from great wealth, usually gained through the monopoly of ownership over basic resources. Politics and social issues matter little to the globalist ruling elite, who move smoothly between corporate business and government service. The desire for wealth with its attendant power and control drives their activities. It is this unswerving attention to commerce and banking that lies behind nearly all modern world events. It is the basis for a new world order, mentioned by both Hitler and former President George H.W. Bush. In 21st century America, many thoughtful persons have witnessed what appears to be a recycling of the events of pre-World War II Germany. The destruction of a prominent national structure, rushed emergency legislation, the rise of a secretive national security apparatus, attempts to register both firearms and people, coupled with preemptive wars of aggression propelled by fervent nationalism. This may be simply a coincidence, some synchronistic cycle of history, but this also may be a covert plan being carried out by individuals following a definite agenda. Communism versus National Socialism. As documented in Rule by Secrecy, the same financial powers that built the United States into the world's foremost superpower also created communism. After an aborted revolution in 1905, thousands of Russian activists had been exiled, including the revolutionaries Leon Trotsky and Vladimir Lenin. After years of attempts at reform, the Tsar was forced to abdicate on March 15, 1917, following riots in St. Petersburg believed by many to have been instigated by British agents. In January 1917, Leon Trotsky, a fervent follower of Karl Marx, was living rent-free on Standard Oil property in Bayonne, New Jersey. He worked in New York City as a reporter for the New World, a communist newspaper. Trotsky had escaped Russia in 1905 and fled to France, from where he was expelled for his revolutionary behaviour. He soon discovered that there were wealthy Wall Street bankers who were willing to finance a revolution in Russia, wrote journalist William T. Still. One of these bankers was Jacob Schiff, whose family had lived with the Rothschild family in Frankfurt, Germany. According to the New York Journal American, it is estimated by Jacob's grandson John Schiff that the old man sank about $20 million for the final triumph of Bolshevism in Russia. Schiff, a Rockefeller banker, had financed the Japanese in the 1904-05 Russo-Japanese War for control of Manchuria and had sent his emissary George Kennan to Russia to promote revolution against the Tsar. Another was Senator Elihu Root, attorney for Federal Reserve co-founder Paul Warburg's Kuhn, Loeb and Company. Root, an honorary president of the Secretive Council on Foreign Relations and a former U.S. Secretary of State who moved smoothly between government positions and his law practice in New York City, contributed yet another $20 million, according to the congressional record of September 2, 1919. Schiff and Root were not alone. Arsene Degolovich, who was present during the early days of the Bolsheviks, later wrote, "In private interviews, I have been told that over 21 million rubles were spent by Lord Alfred Milner in financing the Russian Revolution." Milner, a German-born British statesman, was the primary force behind Cecil Rhodes' Round Tables, a predecessor of the Council on Foreign Relations. The American International Corporation AIC, formed in 1915, also helped fund the Russian Revolution. AIC directors represented the interests of the Rockefellers, Rothschilds, DuPonts, Kuhns, Loebs, Harrimans, and the Federal Reserve, as well as Federal Reserve co-founder Frank Vanderlip and George Herbert Walker, the maternal great-grandfather of President George W. Bush. Trotsky left the United States by ship on March 27, 1917, just days before America entered the war, along with nearly 300 revolutionaries and funds provided by Wall Street. Trotsky, whose real name was Lev Davidovich Bronstein, was being trailed by British agents who suspected him of working with German intelligence since his stay in pre-war Vienna. In a speech before leaving New York, Trotsky stated, "I am going back to Russia to overthrow the provisional government and stop the war with Germany." When the ship carrying Trotsky and his entourage stopped in Halifax, Nova Scotia, they and their funds were impounded by Canadian authorities, who rightly feared that a revolution in Russia might free German troops to fight their soldiers on the Western Front. But this well-grounded concern was overcome by President Woodrow Wilson's alter ego, Colonel Edward Mandell House, who told the chief of the British Secret Service, Sir William Wiseman, that Wilson wanted Trotsky released. On April 21, 1917, less than a month after the United States entered the war, the British Admiralty ordered the release of Trotsky, who, armed with an American passport authorized by Wilson, continued on his journey to Russia and history. At the same time, Lenin also left exile. Aided by the Germans and accompanied by about 150 trained revolutionaries, he was put on the infamous sealed train in Switzerland, along with at least $5 million, according to Still. The train passed through Germany unhindered, as arranged by German banker Max Warburg, the brother of Paul Warburg, who co-founded the Federal Reserve System and handled U.S. financing during World War I, and the German High Command. Lenin, like Trotsky, was labelled a German agent by the government of Alexander Kerensky, the second provisional government created following the Tsar's abdication. By November 1917, Lenin and Trotsky, backed by Western funds, had instigated a successful revolt and seized the Russian government for the Bolsheviks. But the communist grip on Russia was not secure. Internal strife between the Reds and the Whites lasted until 1922 and cost some 28 million Russian lives, many times the war loss. Lenin died in 1924 from a series of strokes after establishing the Third International, or Comintern, an organization formed to export communism worldwide. Trotsky fled Russia when Joseph Stalin took dictatorial control, and in 1940 was murdered in Mexico by an agent of Stalin's. Some conspiracy authors have seen a dual purpose to the funding of the Bolsheviks. It is clear that revolutionaries like Lenin and Trotsky were being used to get Russia out of the war to the benefit of Germany, and communism was being supported by the globalists to advance their plan of creating tension between the capitalist West and socialist East. A.K. Chesterton, a right-wing British journalist and politician, who in 1933 joined Oswald Mosley's British Union of Fascists, observed that to understand politics one must make a study of power elites. These elites, preferring to work in private, are rarely found posed for photographers, and their influence on events has therefore to be deduced from what is known of the agencies they employ. He once wrote in his magazine Candor, "At times, capitalism and communism would appear to be in conflict, but this writer is confident that their interests are in common and will eventually merge for one world control." Because of the warring factions in post-revolution Russia, sending an official delegation to Russia was problematic. Therefore, American financiers came in the form of the American Red Cross Mission. One head of this group was Raymond Robbins, described as the intermediary between the Bolsheviks and the American government, and the only man whom Lenin was always willing to see, and who even succeeded in imposing his own personality on the unemotional Bolshevik leader. Lenin apparently came to understand that he was being manipulated. "The state does not function as we desired," he once wrote. "A man is at the wheel and seems to lead it, but the car does not drive in the desired direction. It moves as another force wishes." This other force was the globalists behind the birth of communism itself, monopoly finance capitalists, as Lenin described them. One of the greatest myths of contemporary history is that the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia was a popular uprising of the downtrodden masses against the ruling class of the Tsars, wrote author G. Edward Griffin. However, the planning, the leadership, and especially the financing came entirely from outside Russia, mostly from financiers in Germany, Britain, and the United States. The flight of the privileged elite from Russia in 1918 sent shockwaves through the capitals of Europe and America and prompted a backlash that lasted for decades. The cry, "Workers of the world, unite!" struck fear into the capitalists of Western industry, banking and commerce who were not in the know. This fear trickled through their political representatives, employees, and on into virtually every home. Mystified conspiracy researchers were puzzled for years about why such high-level capitalists as the Morgans, Warburgs, Schiffs, and Rockefellers could condone, much less support, an ideology that overtly threatened their position and wealth. Author Gary Allen explained, "In the Bolshevik Revolution, we have some of the world's richest and most powerful men financing a movement which claims its very existence is based on the concept of stripping of their wealth men like the Rothschilds, Rockefellers, Schiffs, Warburgs, Morgans, Harrimans, and Milners. But obviously these men have no fear of international communism. It is only logical to assume that if they financed it and do not fear it, it must be because they control it. Can there be any other explanation that makes sense?" The manufactured animosity between the democracies of the West and the communism of the East produced continuous tension from 1918 through the end of the 20th century, but it threatened to get out of hand. Some researchers believe that the threat of worldwide communist socialism caused these globalists to turn to German nationalists. They funded the rise of National Socialism in Germany and saw an armed Greater Germany as a barrier to communism in Europe. National Socialism was a form of socialism almost indistinguishable from communism, only it was confined within national geographic boundaries. Under National Socialism, the globalists could pit the various nations against each other. But following Germany's military successes in Poland, the Low Countries, and France, these globalists realized they faced the same problem they had with the communists. A total German victory would result in a worldwide National Socialist system unable to produce the tensions and conflicts necessary for maximizing profit and control. They also may have feared that Stalin's Soviet Union was about to launch an attack on Western Europe. Only Hitler's Germany had the strength to prevent this. At some point, the globalists determined that the Axis, after blocking Russia's invasion of Europe, should lose the war. They also began drawing up plans for the survival and renewal of a new form of National Socialism, one not dependent on racism and ethnicity. Working with the same financiers and capitalists that had helped create German Nazism, these globalists began laying the foundation for a Fourth Reich. Conspiracy researchers have long suspected that one element of this German influence has been centered in the secretive Skull and Bones fraternity on the campus of Yale University. Known variously as Chapter 322, the Brotherhood of Death, the Order, or more popularly as Skull and Bones, or simply Bones, the order was brought from Germany to Yale in 1832 by General William Huntington Russell and Alphonso Taft. Russell's cousin Samuel Russell, who was an integral part of the British-inspired Opium Wars in China, Taft, Secretary of War in 1876 and U.S. Attorney General and an ambassador to Russia, was the father of William Howard Taft, the only person to serve as both President and Chief Justice of the United States. Another prominent Bones member was Averell Harriman, who has been described as a man at the heart of the American ruling class and played a prominent role in the establishment of the new American empire. A pamphlet detailing an 1876 investigation of Skull and Bones headquarters at Yale, known as the Tomb by a rival secret society, stated its founder Russell was in Germany before senior year and formed a warm friendship with a leading member of a German society. He brought back with him to college authority to found a chapter here. Thus was Bones founded. The secret German society may have been none other than the mysterious and infamous Illuminati. Ron Rosenbaum, a former Yale student and one of the few journalists to take a serious look at Skull and Bones, noted that the official Skull and Bones emblem of the order was also the official crest of the Illuminati. In an investigative piece for Esquire magazine, Rosenbaum wrote, "I do seem to have come across definite, if skeletal, links between the origins of Bones rituals and those of the notorious Bavarian Illuminists who did have a real historical existence. From 1776 to 1785, they were an esoteric secret society with the more mystical free-thinking lodges of German Freemasonry." Other researchers agree that the order is merely the Illuminati in disguise, since Masonic emblems, symbols, German slogans, even the layout of their initiation room, are all identical to those found in Masonic lodges in Germany associated with the Illuminati. The tomb is decked out with engravings in German, such as Ob Arm, Ob Reich, Im Tod gleich. Whether poor or rich, all are equal in death. According to US News and World Report, one of the Bonesmen's traditional songs is sung to the tune of Deutschland über alles. The Bavarian Illuminati was formed on May 1, 1776 by Adam Weishaupt, a professor of canon law at Ingolstadt University of Bavaria, Germany. His Illuminati were opposed to what they saw as the tyranny of the Catholic Church and the national governments it supported. "Man is not bad," Weishaupt wrote, "except as he is made so by arbitrary morality. He is bad because religion, the state, and bad examples pervert him. When at last reason becomes the religion of men, then will the problem be solved." Weishaupt also evoked a philosophy that has been used with terrible results down through the years by Hitler and many other tyrants. "Behold our secret. Remember that the end justifies the means," he wrote, and that the wise ought to take all the means to do good which the wicked take to do evil. Thus for the enlightened, or illuminated, any means to gain their ends is acceptable, whether this includes deceit, theft, murder, or war. The key to Illuminati control is secrecy. The great strength of our order lies in its concealment. Let it never appear in any place in its own name, but always covered by another name and another occupation, stated Weishaupt. He not only deceived the public, but he reminded his top leaders they should hide their true intentions from their own initiates by speaking sometimes in one way, sometimes in another, so that one's real purpose should remain impenetrable to one's inferiors. In 1777, Weishaupt rolled his brand of Illuminism into Freemasonry after joining the Masonic Order's Lodge Theodore of Good Counsel in Munich. This lodge integrated with the Grand Orient Lodges, which, according to several researchers, were at the core of the Illuminati penetration into Freemasonry. By 1783, the Bavarian government saw the Illuminati as a direct threat to the established order and outlawed the organization, which prompted many members to flee Germany, only spreading their philosophies farther. Many researchers today believe the Illuminati still exists and that the order's goals are nothing less than the abolition of all government, private property, inheritance, nationalism, the family unit, and organized religion. This belief partially comes from the intriguing notion that the much-denounced Protocols of the Elders of Zion, used widely since its publication in 1864 to justify anti-Semitism, was actually an Illuminati document with Jewish elements added later for disinformation purposes. Even though the Illuminati faded from public view, the monolithic apparatus set in motion by Weishaupt may still exist today, commented author William T. Still. Certainly the goals and methods of operation still exist. Whether the name Illuminati still exists is really irrelevant. No one can doubt that socialism, whether Illuminati-inspired or not, has come to the United States, and socialism is the cornerstone of Nazi philosophy. Beginning with seemingly innocuous programs like Social Security and continuing through a myriad of government programs such as Medicare, farm subsidies, food stamps, and student entitlements, it seems that nearly every aspect of life today involves the centralized federal government, which since the attacks of 9/11 continues to draw ever more power unto itself. USA Today reported a sweeping expansion of social programs since 2000 has sparked a record increase in the number of Americans receiving federal government benefits such as college aid, food stamps, and health care. A USA Today analysis of 25 major government programs found that enrollment increased an average of 17% in the programs from the year 2000 to 2005. Socialism has come to America because the National Socialists of the New World Order recognize that any social program requires central authority, and they know full well that with their immense wealth and power they can control any central authority. Over the years, they have masked this creep of socialism by distracting appeals to nationalism. Americans are constantly reminded that the United States is God's gift to the world, the epitome of freedom and democracy. Patriotism has been used to fan the flames of nationalism among Americans. Today, anyone who criticizes foreign policy, oversees military interventions, or even questions national policies opens themselves to charges of being unpatriotic. It is possible that the United States is indeed becoming the Fourth Reich, the continuation of a philosophy of National Socialism thought to have been vanquished more than half a century ago. Such a concept may seem absurd to those who cannot see past the rose-coloured spin, hype and disinformation poured out daily by the corporate mass media, most of which is owned by the same families and corporations that supported the Nazis before World War II. Many today describe what they see as neo-Nazism, the movement to revive National Socialism, but this is a misnomer. There is nothing neo or new about this trend. National Socialism never died. The philosophies of fascism are alive and active in modern America. Unfortunately, younger generations cannot understand the nuances of differences between fascism, corporate power, democracy, and a democratic republic. While the USA helped defeat the Germans in World War II, we failed to defeat the Nazis. Many thousands of ranking Nazis came to the United States under a previously classified program called Project Paperclip. Many other Nazis and war criminals set up shop in a variety of other nations, and many travelled on passports issued by the Vatican. They brought with them miraculous technology such as the V-2 rockets, but they also brought with them Nazi ideology. This ideology, based on the Illuminati premise that the end justifies the means, includes unprovoked wars of aggression and curtailment of individual liberties, and has gained sway in the land of the free and the home of the brave. Ranking Nazis, along with their young and fanatical protégés, used the loot of Europe to create corporate front companies in many countries, including Spain, Portugal, Sweden, Turkey, and Argentina. More than 200 fronts were created just in Switzerland, that banking hub that continued to handle Nazi money before, during, and after the war. Utilizing the stolen wealth of Europe, which may have included the legendary treasure of Solomon, Men with both Nazi backgrounds and Nazi mentality wormed their way into corporate America, slowly buying up and consolidating companies into giant multinational conglomerates. They met little resistance from corporate leaders who had supported them in previous years and could not resist the temptation of obscene profits. Nor were they checked by others who had grown fearful over the communist threat. In time, they all became partners in a new version of America. Well, that's it for today. I'll read the next one later on. I hope I was clear, and I'm terrible at pronouncing German words, so I apologise to everybody for that. Talk to you again soon. Bye.